I think that one of the definitions or one of the ways that you get to a police state is when you cannot question policing. And I think that we have become dangerously close in some corners, clearly not all and not the majority, but in some corners of this city, we've gotten dangerously close to a police state mentality when you're not allowed to question anything. It does not take a left-winger or radical to question why a man begging that he can't breathe is dead. Any human being would question, wait a minute, why didn't you stop choking him? And I think that if we're going to find a mid-ground in how we deal with low-level crime and policing of low-level crime, we at least must start with the boundaries of there is wrong on both sides. And those that are wrong on both sides should be held accountable. One of the reasons that we have always raised the question of going outside of local prosecutors is because local prosecutors function hand in glove with local police. And in order to establish a case, you ask local police to help turn on their fellow local policemen. And usually that puts the appearance, if not in fact, the actuality of a conflict of interest. When you step outside of that with the federal government, there is the local prosecutor does not use federal government agents or FBI to gather their evidence, and you get more of an objective review or at least the appearances of some. And we've been successful. The most noted is Rodney King in California, Simi Valley acquitted, got into federal court and won, and right here locally, Abner Lawima, where the local district attorney stepped aside and we successfully saw prosecution of police there. So one of the reasons that is done because in many ways we think it protects the prosecutor, because the prosecutor then is not depending upon a conflicted local police to deal with having to turn on, in their minds, their own allies or own colleagues in the police department. I think that we must find a mid-ground between how we protect people, particularly from guns and violent crimes, and how we protect people's rights. I think that the initial movements toward community policing showed great promise. I think that we are at a very interesting point now where we've seen a reduction, a serious reduction in stop and frisk. And I think that as we now continue this debate on broken windows, that if community groups, civil liberty groups, NYPD, can come together and form a policing program that both satisfies the continued reduction and maintenance of that reduction of crimes, but at the same time not at the expense of civil liberties, we're at an opportune time, both in terms of city policy and in where the data is, to try to formulate that program. But in order to do that, I think all must come to the table feeling that all things are equal and accountable. That is why I said what I said at the City Hall Roundtable, that the answer is not first training. The answer is when we know that police will be held accountable. And all the training in the world will not matter until police see one of their own prick walk for breaking the law. Now, they, of course, went front page and said I was lecturing the police commissioner. It was interesting to me. They invite me to City Hall. We have a meeting. The mayor walks me in, seats me at the front of the table, and then the tabloid wants to know why I was sitting at the front of the table where the mayor sat me and why I addressed the commissioner about a case that the family had asked me to represent them. the absurdity of tabloid media in New York is just crazy. As he said, right now, you might remember just 4 months ago, the President of the United States came to New York to speak at our convention. So I'm not exactly overwhelmed with going to City Hall anymore. And what I asked the media was, well, let me ask you something. If the meeting was about Staten Island, and I have been asked by the Gardner family to represent them, where would you suggest I have sat? In the back of the room? I mean, where was I? And first of all, given what we do every day, what would make you think that I was just waiting with bated breath to go to City Hall and sit with the mayor or the police commissioner about anything other than my concern for the case? But it's, a lot of the media in New York just has not caught up with 2014. I think they're still back in 1988. Not only with me, but with the whole perspective of the city. The reality is that I think we have a great opportunity under this administration, given these crime statistics, to create a mid-ground, a coming together, a policy that could keep crime down and protect people's civil liberties and deal with racial profiling, if we are willing to hold all sides accountable. I think the Gardner case is going to be very critical in that, because I do not think you can sell to many of us that a man on videotape begging for his life should have died. And if there is any meaning to a policy of illegal chokehold, if nothing else, the officer has to deal with that. And to act unwilling to do that, I think, would poison a discussion of fairness around policing in the city. Again, I underscore, we're talking about he was selling loosies at its worst. His friend saying he wasn't even selling that day. I'm saying stipulate, give them the loosies. Are you telling me now that we're going to choke folk to death for selling loosies? And that we're divisive to question that? That is certainly not a city to me that any of us want to see happen. So my position clearly is, yes, I think that we're pregnant with opportunity. I hope we do not blow the opportunity at this point. I also think that that one of the most explosive issues in the country has always been policing. And I think that New York has been fortunate that it has a viable movement in labor and in civil rights, so that we've not had these explosions. But if you look at Watts, South Central, all of the major explosions, Rodney King, they were usually around policing. It's interesting. People don't explode over poverty. And I'm not suggesting they do. If anyone's here from the Post, I'm not advocating any explosions. But I think the reason you see the reaction around policing is that when people feel they cannot trust those that they have been given the safety of their family, they lose it. When they feel they're under siege by those that they feel that are there to protect them, they become most desperate. And I think because people in New York have had ways to express their outrage, that we've not had a lot of that here. And I think that that is a good thing for all. One, because I think any violence is wrong. But second, I think that it, in many ways, obscures the real reasons for the protest. When I was in Ferguson, I told the young people that had engaged in some of the violence that even though I understand your anger, not only don't I agree with violence, you are hurting the case. Because the defense of the policeman that killed Michael Brown is that Michael Brown was a violent, out-of-control young man, and every time you act violent and out of control, they can therefore transfer that to Michael Brown and win this case. So not only do I have moral problems with it, I have strategic problems with you becoming exactly what the opposition wants to project the deceased as. Thankfully, that is not happening in New York. It is interesting, of course, you all, I'm sure, read it in all of the tabloids, that the same week we saw 2 or 3 nights of explosive violence in Ferguson. We marched over 10,000 people in New York and Staten Island, and not one window was broken. And I'm sure you saw all the front pages praising us for that. I think sometimes if we were a little more balanced and fair in our analysis, we could go a longer way in these discussions. So my bottom line is we need accountability on all sides. We need to use this opportunity to try and create policy that will satisfy civil liberties and crime. And we need to start saying that all police are not born with perfection and above being questioned. Because where we cannot be ruled by a mob that says the police are wrong, we cannot move toward a police state where you cannot, under any circumstances, question police. Thank you very much.